Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm pumped today to have with us Quinn McArthur. Quinn, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Jamie. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's sunny. It's cold here in Maryland, but I'm vertical. These are two good things. It's sunny and I'm vertical. So
You're welcome
um,
anytime down here in Florida, man. Come on down.
there you go. What's the weather like down there?
Oh, it's freezing today. It got below 60 today. It's freezing cold.
It's rough. I feel terrible for you. Um, so Quinn is the founder of Apex Capital, and I know Quinn, you're also working a co-founder of the Legacy Land Fund. We're going to get into some of the stuff you've got going on. But for the listener, who are you and what are you up to today?
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, like Jamie said, Quinn McArthur, married of 12 years, have three small children. I live in a small beach town called Ponte Vedra Beach. It's right outside of Jacksonville, Florida. We're a Christian family, so we try to stay focused on stewarding what God has given us and serving others. And one way that I've done that is through my vocation in full-time real estate investing. So a bunch of investments going on in the commercial real estate space, but the one I'm most excited about is the Legacy Land Fund that we just launched earlier this year.
That's awesome. We're going to dive into some specifics as much as we can later in the show on that new fund that you have going on with Eric Sharaga. Um, so Quinn, let's jump into your backstory. I know you are a West Point grad and a former Green Beret, which I think the listener is going to find fascinating. I know we were chatting a little bit before we hit record, and I know you've had some phases in your life and some life decisions to make. As far as your professional, um, your vocation versus family life, and kind of how you want to have things play out on a lifestyle from a lifestyle standpoint and financial standpoint. Um, Jump back into your backstory, if you would, and why'd you join the military?
Um, I wish I could say that it was for because of to serve my country, and of course that was part of it. Um, but it was really seeking adventure. I had some friends and some family friends that had went to West Point and had served, and just I looked up to them. They were mentors of mine. So I think either from childhood I was taught Christian conservative values, and at an early age I was always taught to kind of serve. So
Mhm.
that was always part of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so, when I got the chance, when everyone was kind of graduating from high school and going to whatever university, when everyone was zigging, I zagged and
Okay.
found myself at West Point, um, and then jumped into my Army career.
Yeah, that's awesome. We similarly, um, you know, really the reason I served was to try to be a part of something bigger than myself, and I definitely wanted some adventure as well. So I can appreciate all of what you just said. And so tell us a little bit about your experience at West Point, and then your time in the Army.
Well, again, I wish I could say West Point was a blast. First 2 years are pretty rough, and then you kind of come into your own in the latter years. I had a great Army experience, though. I mean, I served active duty 10 years in the infantry in the kind of the first half, and then later in special operations. And I had a good experience. I had great units. I served with amazing soldiers, had great mentors, commanders. Challenging deployments certainly. Um, but I felt like it was, as I mentioned, kind of growing up with strong values, it was almost like a training ground to kind of prove yourself,
Yeah,
and then kind of like hone your skills and kind of live out those values to a
yeah.
certain degree.
Where were you deployed?
Man, like everybody, we were all over the Middle East, and then
Yeah,
my particular unit I was with in special operations, we were all over Central and South America.
got it. So I imagine you have taken some of those principles, from the Army and applied them to the rest of your life. Is there anything that comes to mind right now as far as just one or two principles or lessons you learned through your Army experience that you've incorporated into your life?
Now, I think the biggest thing for me was, the Army's pretty regimented, obviously, and they give you like your task and purpose, but you'd be surprised that, well, you wouldn't, you know how it is, but I think some people would be surprised at the ambiguity sometimes of your mission set, and so you're kind of given a task and purpose, but like, how do you accomplish it, with limited resources? And so that kind of that gray area that you live through, day in, day out, deployment after deployment, training cycle after training cycle, it's like, um, I didn't realize it at the time, obviously, but it was kind of a perfect like training ground for entrepreneurship. Kind of like, hey, I know where I want to go. I can set goals and I have a vision, but like, how do I get there? Like, what do I do right now? What do I do in this quarter, in this year? And so
Yeah. Yeah, I
that's
think the
probably
military, it's there's so much planning that does go on. In some ways it's like just overkill, depending on what the whole like MDMP process. I'm not even sure if that's still a thing, but
of course it is.
um, there's so much planning that goes on, which is critical. But then the reality is nothing ever goes to plan, right? And so, there are a couple of quotes about that. One is from Mike Tyson, and the other is an actual military related quote. But yeah, it's so anything about planning. Planning versus real life. Any insights there?
No, I think you hit it, and I'm terrible with quotes, but I know what you mean. Like when the bullets start flying, or when you get punched in the mouth, like all your beautiful
Exactly.
plans like go out the window. And then as an officer, as you know, like
Yeah.
you're like, okay, this is how it should be. We're gonna plan this out, and in your mind, it's great. And then, man, it never goes according to plan, and you just got to kind of pivot and be
Yeah.
flexible. Luckily, had great, NCOs around me and other
Yeah.
support that would kind of keep me on track. But
Yeah. Well, and I think it's critical that you do that planning and practice because then you still have sort of principles and I guess a North Star to go back to when things do go awry. Because
yeah, it's the contingencies. It's the
right.
contingency planning. It's kind of like with all the what ifs,
Yeah.
and it's almost like the military teaches you, like forces you to like list them out. Hey, what could happen? And
Yeah.
without like deliberately doing that, you wouldn't, half of them aren't going to happen. Most of them aren't going to happen. But like the
Sure.
one that does, it's like you've at least brainstormed, you
Yeah.
know, you've just kind of molded over your head. Um, I think it
Yeah.
directly applies to investing and everything else.
So 10 years, that's kind of the tipping point or typically 10 or 12 years once you've got maybe 12 years in, most people are not getting out of the military, right? Because you're so close to that 20-year mark. So obviously there was some serious decision making going on at that point in your life. Take us behind the curtain a little bit and let us know what was the context and why'd you get out of the military?
Well, yeah, you're right. First of all, 10 years is kind of like, hey, you're kind of promotable to major and they hold the carrot out for, hey, we'll send you back to school and you can go to this cool school and go here and there. And but for us, it was for us, my family, it was a very deliberate decision, one that we thought about and prayed about for quite some time. Obviously, you kind of know it's coming. Because of my deployment cycle, I had missed really the first 2 years of my son's life,
Mm.
and so
Hmm.
we learned that we were having twins. And so that was a fairly easy decision, kind of hard in the sense that, I invested so much time
Yeah.
into, uh, into what I was doing and I was doing well. And, again, great units and great commanders. So I was like, man, I was on a good path,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
family came first, and
Sure.
so the primary reason was just focus on the family, stay close to home. I didn't want to miss any more of the important things.
Yeah. Well, I can say, I did 8 years in the reserves. I did about 4 years of active duty time within that 8 years. And, I never had any goals of retiring from the military. To me, it was like there was some internal pressure from the military to stay in. And, but to me, it's like, well, most people don't serve. So I feel like, what I've done is good. And the reserves are certainly different. And I was not in SF by any means, but yeah, I felt like I was constantly missing birthdays, just, and the higher up you go, the more responsibility you have, just like anything else. And the whole one weekend a month and 2 weeks per year is not really accurate in reality. So it's like there was a lot of, just opportunity cost, on the family side for me as well. And I mentioned to you before we hit record that I missed our first three wedding anniversaries due to the military, and which, it looked like I got scared and ran off, but that doesn't do a whole lot for your marriage, if you're not home. So it's hard. It's I think I don't have stats in front of me, but I'm sure the divorce rate in the military, certainly in SF, I would guess, is higher than across the board, outside of the military. Do you know if that's true?
I don't know the stats, but I mean, those guys are studs. They sacrifice so much,
Yeah.
and it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like the guys who are single and like without families. It's kind of like, well, shoot,
Yeah.
now you can do that training cycle. You can go on the deployment. It's like, well, there's a reason why. Because you keep pulling me. It's like, no,
Right.
there's
Right. Yeah,
such, I mean, the men and women out there still serving, and there's even though it doesn't look like there's not much going on in the world, there's so much activity.
for sure.
Um,
So, what was that like from an identity standpoint? I mean, you touched on it a little bit. You've put so much time and training to become this person. I mean, not, I know there's more to life than just your military career, but that's a big part of it at that point, right? So what's going through your mind, from a personal standpoint? And I guess I'd say just relationship with yourself and your view of yourself and who you are. What was going through your mind when you got out of the military?
yeah. I think identity crisis would be too strong, but definitely struggles emotionally, mentally.
Hmm.
I'd invested so much time,
Hmm.
effort, energy, and so did my wife, just and all of my family, just the stress of it all, and then to just kind of just pivot and move
Hmm.
um, was very tough. It's kind of like I made the decision all for good reasons, but then for the first several months, if not a year or more, you're kind of like second guessing, you
Hmm.
know. And it became really clear, and actually, it surprised me how much my identity was tied
Mm.
to
Hmm.
my job and what I had. I was a
Yeah.
detachment commander. I was doing this and this, and it's kind of like,
Yeah.
it was kind of a wake up call.
Mm.
And so luckily, you know, um, I have great mom and dad, great siblings who, great friends surrounded me that kind of
Yeah.
pointed me back to, hey, your identity um, is not in those things. It's not,
Hmm.
it's not,
It's bigger than that, right?
it's bigger than that. And my Christian faith tells me that, um, I'm more than that. And I'm a child of God's
Hmm.
and I'm loved no matter what I do. I'm not tied to like what I do. It's it's
Yeah.
it's who I am.
No, it
So
sounds like I mean, it sounds like a real period of pain but growth at the same time. Usually that's what happens is the growth comes out of that pain period for people. Um, I guess what would you say? There's no one size fits all, right? There's no one answer for everybody out there. Everyone has a different situation. All those caveats aside, what would you say to someone who might be thinking of a career change, or might be thinking of quitting their job and launching a business? How do you know when it's the right time to, make that major move? Is there anything you can point to as far as knowing when the timing is right?
I mean, it's definitely something you think about and you pray about, and you don't make any rash decisions. How do you know when the time's right? I think for me, and I think could be applicable for others, is just um, again, it's just going back to like your purpose, like kind of just doing some soul searching and kind of figuring out like why you want to make that pivot. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if it's because things are just not how you prefer them, and it's just kind of you're going through a phase,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe you stay. But if you know that the reason why you want to move is kind of a is achieve like contributing towards your long-term vision,
Yeah.
then I think it's that might be the answer that you need to
Yeah.
kind of make the decision.
Sounds like you had surrounded yourself with also with just a lot of, supportive people in your world, and that may have given you wise counsel during that time. Is that true?
It's very true. I mean, it starts with my wife Amanda, like I mentioned, my parents, friends,
Yeah.
church community. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, and the biggest reason that you got out really was the stress on the family was overwhelming, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that what the main factor was?
Yeah, it was really twofold. I mean, it was I definitely I don't feel like I was running away from anything, but more so, wanted to focus on the family, but also had the kind of had an itch to do my own thing. I
Yeah,
mean, I wanted some autonomy, and you
sure.
can imagine how the army is kind of they have a way of telling you what to do and when to do it,
Yeah,
um and so I was like, man, what I'd love to, kind of create my own schedule and
right.
choose my own adventure.
Absolutely. I think for me, one of the things that's surfaced on this show is asking yourself, even if, and I don't know if this was helpful for you at the time, but I think for making big decisions like that, asking yourself, even if. So, yeah, you can do all these what ifs, and for planning, that's important. But even if I I quit the military and I start a business and that business fails, I'll still be okay because, of my faith in God or support from my family or these other, the greater purpose that you talked about, right? So just asking yourself, even if
Yeah.
this goes wrong, I'll be okay, right? And
Yeah.
you probably could have joined the military again if you wanted to. I mean,
Yeah.
I, you know,
Well, it's scary. It's scary to make the jump, but to me, and the way I'm able to kind of maybe make the shift in my head is like it's almost more scary to think, what if 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you look back and you're so regretful that you didn't make
yes,
the jump. That's even
that's
more
right.
scary.
That's right.
Um, and it's like,
Absolutely.
man, I know I couldn't live.
Yeah, well, I think
The,
that's an excellent point actually that gets glossed over too much is that's risky. Is sometimes not doing anything is actually riskier than actually taking the jump, right? I'm
yeah.
not saying everyone out there listening you should quit your job tomorrow. I don't know, but I
Yeah.
absolutely had the same thing. I worked for 14 years for the Department of Defense, and my transition was a little slower because I worked 7 years part time, and then I finally resigned. But and it wasn't from the military in that case, but there was still it was still hard, to think through that, and yeah, it just it's you've got to. I think my regret would have been too big if I'd the regret would have been bigger had I not left and done my own thing. And so there's a
Yeah.
lot of risk in trying to play it safe as well, if you will.
Yeah.
So
And I think it's true for some people. I mean, I feel like we're both kind of saying, hey, do it. You'll regret it if you don't. But like, I think
yeah,
it's true also for people who like, there was people that stayed in the army that, I was like, hey,
they
that's
should have
good for you.
stayed.
You
Yes,
should have stayed.
absolutely.
Like they
Correct.
were made for this. I mean,
100%.
lifers, right? And then some people who are like great employees, like they love the projects that they're managing, you
Yeah,
know?
right.
They like to
Couldn't
kind of
agree
be
more.
this. So it's like, man,
Entrepreneurship,
that's great. Just
absolutely. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone. We're not saying everyone should make this drastic leap, but I still think it's important to know that there are a lot of people out there who maybe it's just switching jobs, right? Or something that's maybe not quite as drastic as getting out of the military. But
Yeah.
just you don't want to look back and regret, not taking a chance or not living your higher purpose because you were scared or you didn't think beyond the day to day. So okay, so leaving the military is one thing, but how did you know which direction you were going to go after that?
Gosh, it was hard. I mean, so a lot of my counterparts, the most people just kind of, for lack of better options, hey, go back and get your MBA.
Mm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, man, don't know what to do. I'm going to go into iBanking or go into consulting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me, it was, I just didn't know. I knew I didn't want to be a consultant and travel from,
Mm.
be gone most of the week.
Yeah.
Um, I knew I kind of wanted to do something with, my father-in-law was in real estate and some of my
Okay.
friends and family, were in real estate. So I'm kind of like, I kind of knew a little bit about that. Um, and for me, it wasn't like I was called to real estate, but it was more like I felt like God was kind of closing doors in other areas of my life.
Mm.
It's like, well, that got closed, that got closed. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, I was living in Destin at the time and I had a great opportunity to kind of do like an internship at a real
Mm-hmm.
estate development company.
Okay.
And definitely sought it out, but jumped on an opportunity to like, hey, low risk, let's try it for 6 months. Let's put some time and effort into this and kind of let's
Mm-hmm.
see. And I saw for me, it validated what I kind of knew about real estate, and that was
Mm-hmm.
that, a lot of impact can be made with a small team.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Um, it's rewarding financially, it's impactful in the community, it's impactful personally, so, and I saw that firsthand,
Mm-hmm.
close up and personal throughout internship. And so I was like, man, this is it. And so I just closed all the rest of the doors and just started kind of
Focus.
running in that direction. So it was like, again, where people were kind of zigging to the MBA route, I was like, I don't know, for some reason, almost like a
Mm-hmm.
contrarian in that way. I'm kind of like, well, I want to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
didn't know many other people doing,
Mm-hmm.
like just jumping into real estate, but for me it
Yeah.
made sense.
Well, I mean, I still hear the common thread, the thread through your story of service and making an impact.
Yeah.
It's not, I didn't hear, I mean, yeah, you said it's financially rewarding, which is awesome, right, for you, but that's also for your family. But it sounds like really more what you're focused on is making an impact and taking your faith and your experience and your background and parlaying that into your future and making an impact and still serving and still being a part of something bigger than yourself. So I think that thread is, from the military through into your real estate and investing career seems to be consistent. um, okay, so the internship, what did that turn into then?
It turned into a full-time gig for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, cut my teeth as kind of a project manager. So I mean, just
Mm-hmm.
budgeting and scheduling and, is managing people, so which I'd already kind of done in the Army. And
Yeah.
then leverage that experience to a degree to jump into a bigger commercial real estate development shop in Orlando, where just a tremendous exposure to the world of real estate. I feel like most people jump into commercial real estate as like an analyst or
Mm-hmm.
in the brokerage side.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Through a couple connections, I was able to kind of get a pretty good seat in a development role where I can see the full life cycle of a deal from acquisitions through, project management, asset management, and then all the way to investor
Mm-hmm.
relations and the financial modeling and everything else, everything in between. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, to answer
You
your
s-
question, yeah, internship to full time at that same place,
mm-hmm.
and then to a larger development shop doing larger deals, more complex deals.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like that first after the internship or the full-time job, first full-time job was with a smaller team, right? You said?
Smaller team, smaller market,
Yeah.
you more hands on,
Right.
closer to the deal, closer to the
Sure.
yeah.
And it makes sense why I mean, when you're with a smaller team, you're having to do everything, or you're at least involved in each step of the process,
Yeah,
um,
and
which is
I think
valuable.
that's one thing I was really, um, intentional about not doing was getting pigeonholed. I saw
Mm-hmm.
some of my colleagues, I guess you could say, kind of go down a route. And it's kind of like they know one thing,
Sure.
really well.
Yeah.
And but that to me was a mistake, at least for
Sure.
me. I kind of want to see all the different things, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
just
Well, I think I mean, the leadership lessons and experience that you and I both have from the military, I think can be are transferable across pretty much any industry, not saying it's easy to lead people. I'm not suggesting teamwork is a breeze and managing people is super easy, but I think your background and mine can be is pretty well transferable across multiple industries, which is nice. So got into commercial development and then talk about Apex Capital. What was the impetus there?
yeah. So I launched Apex Capital, and that was the impetus was really again at the commercial real estate shop that I was at. I mean, just a great place to learn, great exposure, great boss and mentor and friends around me, surrounding me. But again, it was just I wanted to choose my own strategy, wanted to choose my own deals, wanted to choose my own
Hmm.
partners.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of impact communities and have impact in my own way, you know.
Hmm.
And so that was
Yeah.
that was really the impetus. Again, it wasn't really running away from that, but um, again, I guess another thing would be where we were living in Orlando at the time, and
Hmm.
I felt a little bit stuck, because
Hmm.
we didn't love the area we were in, just wasn't for us,
Hmm.
and so that we didn't have the freedom to kind of be where we wanted to. We moved from Destin to
Hmm.
Orlando, and it's kind of like, hey man, if I'm going to be in Florida, like kind of want to be by the beach. So we were
Hmm.
trying to get back to closer to family and closer to the coast, and I
Nice.
didn't have that. I didn't have that love. Didn't have that ability. So I was like,
Yeah.
look, I gotta.
Right. So, okay. So launching Apex Capital is when you went from a W-2 employee to uh, an entrepreneur. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, talk about that transition because we have a lot of budding entrepreneurs or solo entrepreneurs, newly, someone who just started a business, maybe they have a side hustle. What was that like? I mean, the military transition was a big one away from the military. What was it like to leave your W-2 and start a business? What's going through your mind at that point, besides
Yeah. I mean,
the lifestyle stuff you just talked about?
yeah. Another kind of scary transition. I too had kind of a side hustle that I was leaning into on week nights and weekends.
Hmm.
And so, and then I feel like I was fortunate enough to be at a place in my W-2 that it was pretty entrepreneurial as it was,
Hmm.
so I
Yeah.
kind of got to,
Yeah.
uh, make my own moves there to a degree. But again, I mean, it was a step of faith,
Sure.
and I felt some open doors um, and kind of took the leap.
Yeah. Well, and
And
again, I
it's like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I think it's to me it's like you probably if Apex failed or your next venture failed, I think you could find another job. So, I'm not saying it's easy to make that transition or, just everyone should throw caution to the wind, but even if you tried and failed, quote unquote failed, you can likely go get another W-2. So that's the risk. And if you zoom out enough and take the long-term view, the risk is usually a lot lower than it might seem like in the moment. This is me just projecting a little bit, but
No,
what any thoughts there?
no, yeah, you're right. And I feel like maybe I'm painting the picture that it's like, oh yeah, I decided it and I made the leap and it's worked out. Like, I mean,
Right.
it's years in the making.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm reminded of a deal I did with a gentleman that, he made a lot of money on this one transaction
Hmm.
and one transaction. And I mean, we did well. We executed the business plan. And but he quit his job, right? I mean, and he took this long vacation to Europe. He took his
Hmm.
mom with him, and he was gone for a month. And I'm like, hey, and he's like, I'm quitting. It's over. I'm like, hey, hold on. This was one deal,
Right.
and so I think there's some, I don't know, just I'm always praying for wisdom and discernment. So I think it's all,
Hmm.
you never really arrive at that,
Yeah,
but you kind of have to just take steps and plan, plan
sure.
what contingency plan.
Yeah. Well, and like you said about just you do have to pivot it based on what doors are open and which ones are closed, um, and there's a lot more. Like you mentioned, you glossed right over, but it was long term in the making. We love to look at everybody who's successful as, an overnight success, or oh, he's an entrepreneur and he's just killing it now and he never put in any work beforehand. And no, this was, for me, I was working part-time for 7 years while I was,
Mhm.
building my businesses. So,
Mhm.
but I was still holding that W-2, and didn't really necessarily want to be, but it was the furthest thing from an overnight success, So, but I think a lot of the listeners can relate to the fact that they want that control and that lifestyle, that you've been able to create. It sounds like, and I think the military will do that to you. Yes, in some senses. Um, so, I guess now, what does your day to day look like today?
Again, it's different every day. A lot of phone calls, a lot of, partnership
Hmm.
calls with the different ventures I'm a part of.
Hmm.
A lot of due diligence, scanning through a lot of potential deals that turn out to be, duds or just things you
Yeah,
choose to pass on.
sure.
It's a lot of, I usually try to spend my morning hours in kind of deep work, if you will, kind of just head down,
Yeah,
focused on long-term stuff and try to ignore the inbox, try to ignore try not
yeah,
to schedule too many calls unless I have to. And then, um, the afternoon is kind of like, all right, put out some fires, you know,
yeah.
um, that's when I
What
have
is
the phone
what
calls.
is what's Apex Capital? So, is there a typical deal or a typical client that you work with? You don't have to necessarily do a case study for us, but what does a deal look like that you're actually, that you've worked on before?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll just talk about our latest one is we partnered with a developer in Atlanta. So we raised the capital for a out parcel development. So it's a,
Okay.
build to suit, Starbucks, a ground lease on a gas station. So just developing the out parcels in front of a mixed use community there.
Okay.
So it was a market that I knew, a developer that kind of was acquainted with. So I
Hmm.
felt comfortable. And then with my development background, I felt comfortable underwriting the deal and kind of just to me, it's less about what's the strategy and more about who's executing the strategy,
Hmm. Yeah, it's so true.
especially in real estate when it's a
For sure.
complex type deal. I mean, having sat in the seat of a developer and on the GP side and as a deal
Hmm.
sponsor, it's kind of like, hey, I know um, how crucial it is to
Yeah.
get the execution right.
Well,
And
absolutely. And that there's no question. I mean, if you're investing as a passive investor, this is not financial advice. Neither of us are giving out financial advice. But the operator is number one. I mean, it's just the GP, the experience and the track record of that person managing the deal, I think is number one. That's my personal opinion. And so, and then obviously there are a lot of other important factors such as the market, the actual, you mentioned Atlanta, but the market itself, the geographic location, and the economic factors that play into that. But then thirdly, it's the deal itself. Those are all really important, but I couldn't agree more that the actual people that you're investing with, that's number one. And, because when you're investing passively, you're giving up control. I mean, there's just because you don't want to spend the time or you don't have the experience, that's not your wheelhouse. So there's always a trade-off, right? Maybe you're too busy but you've got capital you want to put to work. You've got to do due diligence on that GP or that operator. So any tips for passive investors with regard to who to place capital with?
yeah, I mean, I agree with you that after a while, the deal fundamentals start to look the same. It's like, I've seen that business model before. It's
Hmm.
like deja
Yeah,
vu.
right.
those returns look exactly the same. It's kind of like, well, like I mentioned in my morning hours, they're spent a lot of, try to get some face-to-face time,
Hmm.
meet people locally. I mean, that's where really rubber meets the road, is like kind of, who are these deal sponsors? So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think your time's well spent, really digging in on what are their values, and
Yeah.
trying to get some references, what's their why? Why are they even doing this? Are they just, so do
Yeah.
they care about the community that they're building in? Do they have they where do they live next door? It's like those are like kind of the nuanced things. It's like
Hmm.
um that I don't think it's talked about a lot, but
Right. Absolutely. And so your primary role is with Apex is to raise capital and find GPs to work with um, on specific deals, right?
that's right, primarily. And then I mean, across a bunch of asset classes, whether it's multifamily or RV
Hmm.
parks, mobile home parks. This one's
Hmm.
a ground up development deal. Just again,
Hmm.
it's less about strategy and more about
Hmm.
like, who is that operator?
Sure.
Um, and I like that I can kind of pivot between asset classes,
Hmm.
geographies.
Yeah,
Um, and to me,
absolutely.
it all comes down to like alignment and transparency, like
Hmm.
when you're analyzing a deal, again, you can kind of run through the numbers. Hey, that looks great. Like, okay,
Yeah,
where in this structure is there alignment? And
sure.
will I have, like you said, you're kind of giving up some control, but I
Yeah,
still at least need some transparency into
for
what are the
sure.
underlying assets, and
Right.
how is this being executed? Where's the schedule? Just all the little things.
Yeah, because I mean, it's all every pro forma is going to be wrong, but once it's actually executed, because no one can predict every variable and how it's going to go. But that's why the operator and getting I love that what you mentioned about the values of the operator. That's critical, and their track record, I think, is really important. So talk about Legacy Land Fund that you're working with Eric Shiraga. Eric and I are friends. He's a fantastic individual. Talk about values. He has I have the
Hmm.
utmost respect for Eric and his
Same.
investing, as a person, but also as a professional investor with mortgage notes and land investing. So talk about what your role with Eric is, and what's going on with the Legacy Land Fund.
Yeah, super excited about that, and I share your sentiments with Eric. And been enjoyed getting to know him over the past several months, and he's got a great book called Lean Lord that kind of goes
That's right.
into detail on uh, on the specifics of mortgage note investing. I've been investing in land for ever since I was back in the Army, actually.
Okay.
So that's kind of been my income, my stable, reliable like income stream, is investing in land and land
Nice.
flips and land notes, performing notes, and it just made sense to me. Like, I think going back to quotes, like I think Warren Buffett said something like, "Don't invest in a business that you can't understand." And
Right.
so, like, in notes, I mean, it just makes sense. The fundamentals make sense.
Sure.
Um, and then couple that with land. I mean, again, being on the commercial side, I mean, you see the issues with tenants. You see the issues with the improved structure on the land. And so when like
Yeah.
that goes away, and you don't have the tenants, termites, and um,
Trash.
trash, toilets, yeah, and
Toilets
all that's
is, yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
It's like, man, that's kind of a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the fund it's really just a continuation of what Eric and I have been doing for years. It's just
Hmm.
now allowing others
Hmm.
access to the deals that we're doing.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's I've brought in friends and family on deals, but the compliance gets very challenging once you start to scale. So the fund was really, I didn't intend to do a fund, but it was really
Hmm.
the best option to kind of bring in um, folks who want some exposure to real estate but don't want to own it.
Yeah.
They don't want to manage it. They're trying to buy their time. They're trying to buy
Mhm.
time. They're not trying to buy
Right.
another job.
And so the fund is investing in land notes and lending on land. Is it a debt fund, or can you talk about the actual underlying asset a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, exclusively focused on land. So, I mean, absolutely no improvements. So again, no
Yeah.
management, no tenants, just
Yeah.
mitigate all that liability.
Sure.
But how do you monetize land? Unless you're leasing it out and you have a tenant on there, you monetize it by with these seller finance notes. And so
Hmm.
we have pretty tremendous deal flow
Hmm.
opportunities because of our connections within the network
Hmm.
um, to buy these notes at a discount
Yeah.
and um, and really scale it and build up
Yeah.
a note portfolio.
I've worked with Eric on some deals myself, and he always follows through, and he does have very good deal flow, for sure. And he's established himself in the land space specifically in the last few years. So yeah, I mean, there's always risk, right? But as far as the asset class goes, I would say that this is on the lower side of the risk spectrum. You're not doing ground up development on uh, some speculative hotel or something. Not saying that's always risky, but I think this model point, the underlying asset is on the lower side of the risk spectrum. So, and this is for accredited investors or who can invest in the fund.
Right. It's a 506c accredited investors.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Um, awesome. Anything else you want to add about the fund?
Um, I mean, maybe I'll talk about the name. We named it Legacy, and kind of tying back to kind of what we were talking about is like I think it's important to when you're talking about the financial returns of providing for your family and leaving next generation with with income streams and that wealth generation. But I think it's and maybe even more importantly, like leaving a legacy of quality values, and stewardship and generosity. And so when Eric and I met again through kind of a mutual friend in the land community, we just we hit home on all those kind of on
Hmm.
those values. And so legacy, it was just screaming out to like that's what it has to be called. And so but it's more than just the financial returns. It's really just kind of thinking through, and it's the stewardship and the service piece as well.
Yeah, I love that because let's face it, there are a lot of investment options out there that promise whatever returns. And it's I think for a lot of us it's important to know that we're actually working with good people who want to serve and create a positive impact on the world and the communities, versus just, oh, I need that 8 to 12% return, and it's all about money, money, money. It's important, like you said, from a stewardship standpoint. But I love the fact that you keep returning to values, stewardship, service, impact. Those are
Well,
really.
it's something I got wrong early on, is why I keep coming back to it.
Mm,
It's kind of like, I mean, I chased yield, I chased the return,
mm, hmm.
and um,
We'll talk
and
about that. What did you do wrong? What that we can learn
yeah, I
from?
mean, with picking the wrong investments, the partner was secondary. It was like, what's the deal and what's the return?
Yeah,
How quick can
yeah,
I have the velocity of capital? How quick can I turn this and move on and stuff? And I got caught in some bad investments.
yeah. I can
And
relate.
or I took too much time. It took too much time to kind of put out
Hmm.
fires, and I was just too
Yeah.
time involved. So I mean, when I mentioned that I prioritize, you know, um, the alignment piece,
Hmm.
I don't prioritize control.
Mm.
That's one of the things because I'm solely focused these days on the passive investments.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then again, it goes back to who, not how. I mean,
Hmm.
it's the strategy.
Hmm.
Strategy second. It's who's operating. Who do I want to do business with long term? Not just for this
Sure.
deal, but for future partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah. I got caught in some of that when a lot of the crowdfunding came out. I was throwing some capital at these deals because the numbers looked amazing. This was years ago, but I didn't know who I was investing with. I mean, it's I'd like to think I'm a little bit smarter now, and I've learned from those
Yeah,
mistakes. But it's easy to do. It's easy to get greedy. Basically, it's like, oh, this says 22% IRR. I'm in. Didn't turn
yeah.
out that way.
It's easy to do,
Yeah.
and then not only that, but what you invest in, I mean, that's more or less you're endorsing,
Yeah,
it's like
that's true.
not only the asset, but like that person, you're supporting
Hmm.
that person.
That's
Well,
right.
shoot,
That's a good
so
point.
like
Yeah.
be careful there when you're talking about impact, like
Yeah,
investments have
absolutely.
impact in so many different ways, on the
So true.
community, on you, on them. And so it's like, man, just, I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm kind of just slow down a little. I've
Yeah.
learned to slow down, just said no a lot more lately.
Yeah.
And
Smart. It's really good. All right. You ready for some rapid fire questions before we get out of here?
sure, man.
All right. Quinn, what is one thing that people misunderstand about you?
Um, they misunderstand. I think I might come across like serious or like maybe like uptight or something. I don't feel that way, but I think sometimes I can kind of come across like, oh man, it's like calm down, I'm serious.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Can you joke around a little bit or something?
yeah, yeah.
Um, what's one of your biggest failures that you learned from?
Uh, it's I think my biggest failure, and I definitely haven't completely overcome this, but just kind of relying on my own abilities. I feel like I can
Hmm.
do it,
Hmm.
if I just
Yeah.
try harder. And it's like, man, you've got to surround yourself with like good people, good partners, just slow down, try to
Yeah.
um just have a little more discernment there. But I feel like I just, like, hey, I can do this, I can,
Sure.
it's me.
Right. Yeah. Teamwork. And I know you've talked a lot about faith. It sounds like those are two big factors for you. If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would that be?
Mhm. Um, 18. I would say, yeah, I think longer term. I
Hmm.
felt like
Yeah.
maybe back then I felt like maybe I was thinking long term by thinking like 3 or 4 years out, but
Yeah.
that's just that happened so
Right.
fast. So I think I'd look at the next phase of life, like, hey, here's my next step, plan it out, contingency plan, all that good stuff. But then
Hmm.
what's the next step after that? And then
Sure.
also just the why behind it. I think I always had like good intentions, but like you make goals, but why? What's the underlying like
Hmm.
motive?
Yeah.
Um, so
And even go deeper, like why a couple more times below that initial
yeah,
why.
why? Yeah.
But if you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would that be?
Mhm.
They could still be
I
alive today.
and I
It's up to
still
you.
go with,
Sorry.
man, I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan.
Sure. Love it.
Just yeah, just his story, and then just
Hmm.
I just love to pick his brain.
If you were given $10 million tomorrow, what would you do with it?
Um, and buy some more notes, man.
Hey,
I
that's an
would
option.
well, I mean, I kind of said that jokingly, but honestly, it I feel like, I mean, you can. That's why I love the investment space so well. It's kind of like, that's a big chunk of principal that you wouldn't want to just give. I mean, I hate to say it
Yeah.
that way, but like, man, if you invested that and multiplied it, I mean, you go back to kind of the parable of
Yeah.
the talents, the
All right.
parable of,
Yeah.
I don't know how much a talent was, maybe it was $1 million, but the two gentlemen that multiplied it, they
Mm-hmm.
were
Yeah.
good and faithful servants. And so I would
Right.
do my best to kind of discern how to best multiply that for
One guy
the
buried it, right? And the other,
he buried it and he saved. He thought he was doing a good thing, but he was
right.
wicked.
Right. But
Yeah.
then one 5X did and one 10X did, I think,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, but might be wrong. Um, what's a challenge that you're facing in your business today? There's always a challenge.
Oh yeah. For me, it's just being selective on deals.
Hmm.
I just, as I mentioned, kind of analyzing a lot of deals, going through due diligence, and it's just tough because there's a lot of gray area and there's a lot of nuanced
Sure.
stuff, and so it's just taking the time to, be
Yeah,
patient and work through it all and say no to a lot. It's very challenging.
sure. Um, what is a book or two that you could recommend for my listener?
Um, I mentioned Lean Lord.
Yes,
Um,
it's a good one.
can I plug that again? Lean Lord, Eric Schraga. Um, let's see. Man,
Wait,
one thing I read kind of you mentioned when I was 18, a book was given to me. It was called the Celebration of Discipline,
okay.
Foster.
All
And
right.
I think that's probably didn't capture all the like the wisdom from it back in the day, but I read it again
Sure.
recently. And really took my time, took notes. Celebration of Discipline is a must read, I think, especially for the younger
Richard
crowd.
Foster. I just looked that up.
Yeah,
Nice. Well, I know Jocko Willink has a book about discipline. Discipline equals freedom or something like that.
haven't done that one
Um,
yet. My
yeah,
list of books to read is pretty long.
I read his Extreme Ownership, which was good. Um, awesome. What have we not covered that you want to touch on?
Um, I don't know, man. I mean, I just I think the just trying to I think it's in the financial space in the investing world it's really easy to get caught up in like the day to day and the specific investment strategy, but I'd say I just encourage listeners maybe to just take a big step back, just try to why are you doing that, why are we doing this in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
you know
Sure.
um,
Love
and
that.
just really analyze like the kind of the holistic approach to to what we're doing, and
Yeah,
let that guide your specific strategy. It's so easy to kind of jump right into like a specific thing.
absolutely.
And it's also easy to kind of get direct, like you hear about all the hey, this looks good, this looks good. It's like, well, what based on your resources, based on your skills, based on what your goals are, your specific goals, like
Mm-hmm.
what is
Yeah.
best, and it's different for everybody.
Yeah. And there's always going to be another deal that comes across your desk,
Yeah.
so have patience, take the long-term view. Yeah, this has been really good, Quinn. There's been a bunch of things that I think are inspiring and practical and just very relatable, I would say, as far as not that everyone's been in special forces, but I think we all have, phases in our life and big decisions from a professional standpoint and vocation standpoint, and weighing that with lifestyle and family and I just love the service and impact and being a part of something bigger than yourself that comes through in your story. So this has been awesome. Where can our listeners reach out to you?
It'll be you can if you want to follow the fund, it's legacylandfund.com. You can go there, check everything out. You can subscribe to our email there, I think, and then my email is info at legacylandfund.com. The
Awesome. Is
best
the
way to
fund
reach me.
open now for investors?
It is, yep, open earlier this year and off to a pretty good start.
Great. Fantastic. Well, Quinn McArthur, this has been really good. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. So thanks for taking the
No problem.
time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, pleasure, Jamie. Appreciate it.
And to the listener out there, thank you for spending your most valuable resource with us, and that is your time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.